Hello, today I'm going to show you how to burn an image onto a micro SD card for your Raspberry Pi. I'm using a slightly older version of Raspbian, but we're going to do this with Etcher, and you can get this at the link right here. I'll have it down in the description as well. What we're going to do is plug in our micro SD card and format it. Then we're going to select the image. The image I have is Raspbian Stretch. I'm going to just install the light. Now let's do the full. I'm going to open that. And we already have the device plugged in. A lot of times it'll automatically detect, so make sure you change that to the one you actually want to use. I'm going to flash that on there. Accept that. And it usually takes about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the image you choose. Lots of different things, but let's see how long it takes here. While that's running, I'm going to show you where to get the images of the operating system. Right here, it's raspberrypi.org/software/operating systems. Again, I'll have this link down in the description as well. That downloads as a zip. So you're just going to save that zip to whatever location you want, and that will just download in the format that you need to use the Etcher. You don't have to unzip it or anything. This will take care of everything. So just hit that download button. When it's done, you can use that image, just navigate to it, and you'll be able to install it from there. And once this is done, what we're going to do is just plug in the micro SD into the Raspberry Pi and go from there. Once you do have that flashed onto the card and plugged into your Raspberry Pi, I would recommend going into the Raspberry Pi, putting in your Wi-Fi information, and you enabling SSH communication. And what that does is it lets you operate the Raspberry Pi headlessly. And what headlessly means is that you can open up a command line on your desktop by connecting through it with a software called Putty. This lets you just plug in the Raspberry Pi to power. You don't have to plug in a keyboard, screen, or anything like that. You can log right in and not worry about, wiring up a bunch of hardware to it. So once you've flashed the image onto your micro SD card, you'll plug it into your Raspberry Pi, and you'll need to enable Wi-Fi and SSH on the Raspberry Pi before you can use it headlessly. To use the Raspberry Pi, you'll need to install Putty on your desktop, and that will enable you to log into the command line interface of the Raspberry Pi. It's super handy. You download it from this link here. I'll have it in the description. I think I already have a download of it here. Yeah. Next, install. Don't need to view the README. Okay, so what we're going to do now is yank that out. I'm going to plug in the micro SD card on the Raspberry Pi. So I'll have a link to a video from someone else that will show you how to enable Wi-Fi and SSH on the Raspberry Pi. Okay, so during editing, I couldn't find a good video that just explained how to enable Wi-Fi and SSH. So during the setup, it actually prompted me to set up Wi-Fi, so that's already taken care of. But if it hasn't been taken care of for you, what you're going to want to do is come up to the top left corner, hit that Raspberry Pi button, go down to Raspberry Pi configuration. That'll open a little window. Under interfaces, there is SSH right here. You're going to click enable. So, okay. If Wi-Fi wasn't enabled, you're going to come up to the top left corner up here. And just turn on Wi-Fi, and you'll connect to it like any other computer you would. If you're using a command line interface only, you're going to sudo raspi config. That will open up a menu that looks like this. You're going to arrow down to network options, Wi-Fi, enter SSID and passphrase. I'm going to cancel because I'm already connected, but that's how you start Wi-Fi. And then for SSH, you go down to interfacing options. Hit that, SSH, hit that. Would you like the SSH server to be enabled? Hit yes, and there you go. Hit finish and you're all done. Okay, so we've got the Raspberry Pi connected to Wi-Fi and the SSH is enabled. So what we need now is the IP address of the Raspberry Pi. What you can do is follow this method here. So we're going to open up a command line on the Raspberry Pi and type in ifconfig wlan0. Okay, so that gives us our IP address, which is, I'm going to blur this out, and you can save it for later use. So just type that in, open, the registry, yes, connect anyway. Oh, that's right, I put a space in there. Okay, so now we are connected headlessly to the Raspberry Pi. So just a quick recap, what you're going to need to do is flash a operating system onto the Raspberry Pi. You need to connect the Raspberry Pi to your Wi-Fi or Ethernet. Once you do that, you need to enable SSH on the Raspberry Pi. Once that is done, you need to come back, download Putty, install it, and then open it up. And then once you open it up, type in the IP address of the Pi you need to connect to. It'll pop up with asking for the password. The default user is Pi, and then the password, you should be prompted to change it when you first set up the Pi. Just enter whatever password you chose, and now you are connected to the Raspberry Pi. You no longer need to plug in a screen or a keyboard, and all you need to do is give it power. It'll automatically connect to the internet, and once it's booted up, you can use Putty and connect to it like this. And that is how to connect headlessly to your Raspberry Pi. This will let you use your desktop to program it, install things. It makes it just much easier. So this is how I'll be doing all my tutorials with the Raspberry Pi, is connecting to it headlessly. So I'll probably link this video in the descriptions of those videos, but that is how you do it. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Be kind to someone today. Peace.